Okay, so let's work on a problem where we need to factor a trinomial when the leading coefficient is not equal to 1. So in this case, again, we have a trinomial, 5x squared, middle term here, minus 22xy, and then at the end, our third term is 8y squared. Now, anytime you have a trinomial like this, your squares need to be on the end, and then your middle term would have to be the first variable to the first and the second variable to the first, so this is in the right order. Now, you can work on this problem by just simply writing out two sets of parentheses and play around with the numbers. Like to get 5, the only way you could do that is a 5 times a 1, so you could say 5x times x here. Now, the 8, on the other hand, there's several ways you can multiply to get positive 8. And so a 1 and an 8, a 2 and a 4, playing around would work. But I don't suggest that method because sometimes it takes students a long time to do just trial and error factoring. So I'm going to show you a method that I always teach, and that's called the AC method. And with the AC method, the very first step is you find numbers that multiply to be the product of A and C. So in our particular problem, our A is 5 and our C is 8. So if I find numbers that multiply to be 40, so multiply to equal 40, and at the same time, the two numbers need to add to equal the middle coefficient, which is negative 22. Okay, now the only way you're going to come up with two numbers that multiply to be a positive number and add to be a negative number is if they're both negative. Then you just start working with things that multiply to be 40. So you could say negative 1 times negative 40, right? But that doesn't add to be negative 22, it adds to be negative 41. So then you could try, say, negative 2 times negative 20. Notice that's it, right? Because negative 2 plus negative 20 adds to be negative 22, and negative 2 times negative 20 multiplies to be 40. So that's going to be my two numbers, negative 2 times negative 20. Now, what do we do with those two numbers? Well, second step, we rewrite the middle term using the sum of those two numbers. So notice the middle term here, negative 22xy, I'm going to rewrite with our two numbers. Remember, they were negative 2 and negative 20. So I have 5x squared minus 2. Now notice the variable here is xy, so I have to put an xy with that, minus 20xy. So notice if I combine those back together, that would give me negative 22xy. So whatever variable is here must go with your rewrite. And then plus 8y squared. Notice the first term and the last term did not change at all. Something else I'd like to point out is the order that I write the negative 2 and the negative 20 doesn't matter either. I could have wrote negative 20xy and then minus 2xy. Again, as long as those two numbers multiply to be 40, which was the 5 times 8, and add to be the middle number. Now what do? Step 3, listed down here, factor by grouping. So I'm going to group the first two terms together and the last two terms together. And to do factor by grouping, you factor out the greatest common factor in the first two terms. So notice both of these terms have an x. That is the only thing common to both terms. So I'm going to pull the x out front. If it helps when you do factor by grouping or greatest common factor or anything, you can put that value underneath each one of those so you can clearly see what you have remaining. So if I cancel this x and this x, that's going to leave 5x. And then I cancel that x, and that's minus 2y. Again, just a quick check in your head. If I distributed that back inside, would that give me the 5x squared minus 2y? And it would. Okay. Now, when I move over to the second two terms, I'm going to do the same thing, factor out the greatest common factor. Now, the 20 and the 8 have a 4 in common, and they both have a y to the first power. So I know I want to bring out a 4y. Because that's what's common. Now the next question is, do I do positive or negative? And I'm going to argue that you have to do a negative in this case because what's left in parentheses must match here. Okay? And if I just pulled out a positive 4y, I would have a negative and a positive for my terms, but I need them to be the opposite since the first one's positive and the second one's negative. So again, what am I doing? I'm dividing each of these by negative 4y. That's really what I'm doing there. Okay, so negative 4y comes out. Negative 20 divided by negative 4 is a positive 5, and that y cancels with that y, so I still have an x. And then here, positive 8 divided by negative 4 is minus 2. And then one of those y's cancels with that one, so there's a y. Now here's what I need you to notice. Look, what's in parentheses matches. So my next step is to pull that out front, 5x minus 2y, times what's in front, which is going to be x minus 4y, and our trinomial is completely factored. Now what I like about this AC method is that if you were given a polynomial originally that doesn't factor, because there are many polynomials that are prime, you will not be able to do step 1. It will be impossible to find numbers that both multiply to be the product of A and C and then add to be the middle coefficient. So instead of just trying and not getting there, you know right off the bat if you can't find those two numbers, and then it's prime. And in this case, it wasn't prime. Hope that helped.